She didn't plan for everything to fall apart that morning. In fact, she had planned for everything to go perfectly, the kind of perfect that only comes after months of silent struggle, rejection emails, and nights spent staring at the ceiling wondering how long she could keep going like this. The alarm rang at 6, sharp and unforgiving, slicing through the thin quiet of the apartment. Amina reached out instinctively, silencing it before it could wake the one person she was trying hardest to protect from the harshness of the world. For a moment, she stayed still, eyes closed, breathing slow, gathering herself. Today wasn't just another day. It was the day. The opportunity she had been waiting for. The interview that could change everything, the door that might finally open after so many had been slammed in her face. She turned her head slightly, looking toward the small mattress on the floor beside her bed where her 5-year-old son, Sammy, slept curled up under a faded blanket, his tiny fingers wrapped around the sleeve of his stuffed bear. His breathing was soft, steady, peaceful. He had no idea how much depended on today. She sat up carefully, swinging her legs over the side of the bed, and winced as her feet met the cold floor. The apartment was small, barely more than a single room with a cramped kitchenette attached, but it was theirs. Every corner carried a memory of survival. The chip table where she had filled out endless job applications. The couch she had found second-hand and cleaned until it looked new enough. The wall where Sammy had scribbled with crayons, and she had decided not to erase it because it felt like proof that life, somehow, was still happening here. She moved quietly, slipping into the kitchenette and turning on the dim light. The bulb flickered for a second before settling, casting a soft glow over the space. She reached for the kettle, filling it halfway, her movements automatic, practiced. Her mind was already racing ahead, rehearsing answers, imagining questions, reminding herself to stay calm, to smile, to appear confident even if her hands trembled. She had ironed her clothes the night before, pressing every crease with care as if perfection in fabric could somehow translate into opportunity in reality. A simple navy dress, modest, professional, paired with a blazer that had seen better days, but still held its shape well enough. It wasn't expensive, nothing she owned was, but it was clean, and it was hers. As the kettle began to hum softly, she glanced back toward the bed. Sammy stirred slightly, shifting under the blanket, and she froze, waiting. After a moment, he settled again. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Today had to go right. It had to. She poured hot water into a chipped mug, dipping a tea bag in and watching the color spread slowly, like something fragile finding its place. There was no time for a proper breakfast, but she needed something to steady herself. She took a small sip, then moved to prepare Sammy's things. His lunch was simple, just a peanut butter sandwich, some apple slices, and a small juice box. She arranged everything neatly, as if order in this small act could bring order to the chaos waiting outside. She had arranged for Mrs. Khan, the elderly woman from the next building, to watch Sammy for the morning. It had taken courage to ask, and gratitude had filled her when the woman agreed with a warm smile and a reassuring pat on her arm. It felt like a miracle, a small piece of luck in a life that rarely offered any. That's why when her phone rang, the sound sharp in the quiet room, her heart dropped instantly. She stared at the screen for a second before answering, already knowing something was wrong. "Hello." Her voice was low, careful. "Amina?" "Dear, I'm so sorry," came the voice, weak and strained. "I woke up feeling very unwell. Fever, cough, I don't think I should be around the child today." Amina's grip tightened on the phone. For a second, she couldn't speak. It felt like the ground beneath her had shifted, like everything she had carefully arranged was collapsing all at once. "Are you okay?" she managed finally. "I'll be fine, just need rest. But I can't help today." The words echoed in her head long after the call ended. She stood there, phone still in her hand, staring at nothing. No backup, no family nearby. No one else she could call on such short notice. The clock ticked loudly on the wall, each second pressing against her chest. She looked towards Sammy again. He was awake now, rubbing his eyes, his hair messy, his expression soft and sleepy. "Mama," he said quietly. She forced a smile, walking over to him and kneeling down. "Good morning, my love." He smiled back, that innocent, trusting smile that made everything harder and easier at the same time. Are we going to the park today? He asked. She hesitated, just for a second. Not today, she said gently. Mama has something important to do. He tilted his head. Can I come with you? The question hung in the air. She knew the answer already. She had no choice. Yes, she said finally, brushing his hair back. You're coming with me. The next hour moved in a blur. She dressed him in his cleanest clothes, a small blue shirt and dark pants, combed his hair as neatly as she could, packed his crayons, a small toy, and the old tablet she hoped would keep him occupied. Her own hand shook slightly as she dressed, adjusting her blazer, checking her reflection in the cracked mirror. She didn't look like someone who belonged in a corporate office. She looked like someone trying very hard to be taken seriously. And maybe that would have to be enough. The building she arrived at felt like another world entirely. Glass walls, polished floors, everything shining with a kind of confidence she had never known. She held Sammy's hand tightly as they walked in, her heels clicking softly against the floor. People moved around them with purpose, dressed in clothes that spoke of success, of belonging. She could feel the difference instantly. The receptionist looked up as they approached, her smile polite but fading slightly as her eyes dropped to Sammy. I'm here for an interview, Amina said, keeping her voice steady. Amina Rahman. I have an appointment at 9:30. The receptionist nodded slowly, then glanced at Sammy again. You brought a child. The question wasn't loud, but it carried judgment. Amina straightened her shoulders. My childcare fell through this morning. He'll be quiet, I promise. The woman hesitated, then picked up the phone, speaking in low tones. Amina felt every second stretch painfully. Sammy tugged at her sleeve. Mama, can I draw? He whispered. In a minute, she said softly. The receptionist hung up and offered a tight smile. I'm sorry, but we won't be able to proceed with the interview today. Amina blinked. What? We don't allow children in interviews. It's company policy. The words hit harder than she expected. Please, she said, her voice cracking despite her effort to control it. I've been preparing for this. I really need this opportunity. The receptionist's expression didn't change. You can reschedule. It wasn't a solution. It was a dismissal. Amina swallowed hard, feeling the familiar sting of humiliation rise in her chest. She nodded slowly, forcing herself to remain composed. Thank you, she said quietly. She turned, taking Sammy's hand, each step toward the door heavier than the last. It felt like the end of something, another door closing, another chance slipping away. The elevator doors behind her opened with a soft sound, and a voice cut through the moment. Amina Rahman. She stopped. Turned. A man stepped out, tall, composed, his presence commanding without effort. His eyes moved from her to Sammy and back again, sharp, observant. What seems to be the problem? He asked. And just like that, something shifted. Amina stood still for a moment, unsure whether she had heard him correctly, or if her mind was simply trying to soften the blow of yet another rejection. The man's voice carried a calm authority, the kind that didn't need to be raised to be taken seriously. It wasn't just confidence, it was certainty, the kind that made people stop and listen without question. Yes, she said quietly, turning fully toward him now, her fingers tightening slightly around Sammy's hand. I had an interview, but I was told I need to reschedule. His gaze shifted briefly toward the receptionist, not harsh, not angry, but questioning in a way that made the woman sit a little straighter behind her desk. She brought her child. The receptionist explained quickly. We don't allow that during interviews. The man nodded once, slowly, as if processing something deeper than the words themselves. Then his attention returned to Amina. And that's the only reason? He asked. Amina hesitated, feeling suddenly exposed under his gaze. Yes, she replied. I didn't have anyone to leave him with. I didn't want to miss the opportunity. For a brief second, something unreadable passed through his expression. Not pity, not judgment, something else, something thoughtful. What's your name again? He asked. Amina Rahman. He repeated it quietly, almost to himself. Amina. Then he looked down at Sammy, who was staring up at him curiously, clutching his small pack of crayons. "And what's your name?" the man asked, crouching slightly so he was at eye level. "Sammy," the boy replied, his voice small but steady. The man smiled faintly. "Nice to meet you, Sammy." Amina watched this interaction, confused, unsure of what was happening or where this was going. Then the man stood back up and said something that made her heart skip. "Come with me." The receptionist blinked. "Sir, Mr. Khan has already—" "I'll handle it," he said simply. There was no argument after that. Amina hesitated for just a second, then followed. She didn't know who he was, didn't know why he was helping, but something in his tone made it feel like this wasn't a risk. It was a turning point. They walked through the sleek corridors, past glass offices and quiet conversations that paused just slightly as people noticed them. Amina could feel the eyes, the curiosity, the silent questions. A woman in professional attire walking through the building with a child, guided by a man who clearly held importance here. Sammy stayed close to her, his small hand gripping hers tightly, but his eyes moved everywhere, taking in the unfamiliar world with quiet wonder. They stopped outside a large office at the end of the hallway. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the skyline, sunlight pouring in, making the space feel even more expansive. The man opened the door and gestured for her to enter. "You can sit," he said. Amina stepped inside cautiously, her eyes moving around the room. It was nothing like she had imagined. It wasn't just an office. It was power, space, success, everything she had been trying to reach for so long. Sammy climbed into one of the chairs quietly, already pulling out his crayons. The man moved behind the desk, sitting down with the ease of someone who belonged there completely. "I'm Arman Khan," he said. Amina froze. The name hit instantly. Arman Khan. She had seen it in articles, business magazines, online interviews. Founder, CEO, one of the fastest growing tech entrepreneurs in the country. Her breath caught slightly. I didn't realize," she said. He gave a small shrug. "That's probably for the best." There was a brief pause before he leaned forward slightly. "You came here for an interview," he continued. "So let's have one." Amina blinked, still trying to process everything. "Right now?" she asked. "Why not?" he replied calmly. She straightened instinctively, her nervousness returning but mixing now with something else. "Hope." "Yes," she said. "Of course." "Good," he nodded. "Tell me about yourself." The question grounded her. This part she knew. This part she had practiced countless times. "My name is Amina Rahman," she began, her voice gaining steadiness as she spoke. "I have a background in digital marketing and brand strategy. I worked for about 4 years before I had my son." Arman listened without interrupting, his expression neutral but attentive. "I handled campaign planning, content strategy, analytics, mostly for small to mid-sized businesses," she continued. "After my son was born, I had to step away. But I've been studying, keeping up with trends, working on small freelance projects whenever I could." "Why do you want to come back now?" he asked. She glanced briefly at Sammy before answering. "Because I need to," she said honestly. "Not just financially. I need to build something again. For myself and for him." There was no hesitation in her voice now. Arman nodded slowly. "All right," he said. "Let's see how much you remember." He picked up a pen and tapped it lightly against the desk. "Imagine you're handling a brand that's losing engagement, but still has a loyal customer base. What's your first move?" Amina didn't hesitate this time. "I'd start with data," she said. "Look at engagement metrics, where the drop is happening. If the audience is still loyal, it means the connection isn't completely broken. It's just not being maintained properly." He watched her closely. "I'd review past successful campaigns, identify what worked before, and compare it with current strategies," she continued. "Then I'd focus on reconnecting with the audience. Personalized content, targeted campaigns, maybe even direct feedback loops like surveys." A slight shift in his expression. "Interest. And budget constraints?" he asked. "I've worked with limited budgets before," she replied. "It's about efficiency, micro-targeting, organic reach strategies, leveraging existing customers instead of constantly chasing new ones." Arman leaned back slightly, studying her now in a different way. "You're confident," he said. "I've had to be," she replied quietly. There was a brief silence. Then he stood up. "Come with me," he said again. This time, she followed without hesitation. They moved through another section of the office, until they reached a workspace where a few people were gathered around screens, discussing something. "Zara," Armin called. A woman turned, her sharp eyes immediately focusing on him. "Yes, this is Amina," he said. "She's joining your team on a trial basis." Zara raised an eyebrow. "No HR process?" "I am the process," he replied simply. There was a pause, then a small smirk. "All right," Zara said. "Let's see what she can do." Amina stood there, still trying to catch up with what was happening. "Report on Monday," Armin added, turning back to her. 9 a.m. Her voice came out softer than she expected. "Are you serious?" He met her eyes. "Yes." Emotion rose quickly, unexpectedly. "Thank you," she said. He shook his head slightly. "Don't thank me," he replied. "You earned it." Sammy tugged at her sleeve then, holding up a piece of paper he had been drawing on. "Look, Mama." It was a simple drawing. 3 stick figures holding hands. Amina smiled, her eyes softening. "It's beautiful," she said. Armin glanced at it briefly, then back at her. "Make sure you don't waste this chance," he said quietly. "I won't," she replied. And for the first time in a long time, she truly believed it. Monday came faster than Amina expected, like time itself had decided not to give her the luxury of overthinking. The weekend had passed in a blur of preparation, quiet excitement, and a strange, persistent fear that something might still go wrong. She woke up before the alarm that morning, her eyes opening in the dim light before dawn, her mind already racing. For a few seconds she lay still, staring at the ceiling, letting the reality settle in again. This was real. She had a job to go to. Not just any job, but an opportunity inside a place she never imagined she would step into again after that first moment of rejection. She turned her head towards Sami, who was still asleep, his small hand curled near his face, his breathing steady and calm. For a moment, she just watched him. Everything she was doing, every step forward, every risk, every ounce of courage. It all came back to this small, quiet moment. She leaned over and gently brushed his hair back from his forehead, pressing a soft kiss there. "Wake up, my love," she whispered. He stirred slowly, blinking up at her with sleepy eyes. "Is it today?" he asked, his voice still heavy with sleep. She smiled. "Yes, it's today." A small grin spread across his face. "You're going to win." She let out a quiet laugh, even though her chest tightened slightly at the words. "I'll try." The morning routine moved with a kind of careful urgency. She dressed in the same navy outfit, pressed again, adjusted again, every detail checked twice. Sami was dressed neatly too, his small backpack ready. But this time, there was one crucial difference. The daycare. Armin's assistant had arranged it late Friday afternoon, confirming everything with a smooth efficiency that still felt unreal to Amina. A proper place. Safe. Structured. Paid for. That alone had nearly brought her to tears. By the time they stepped out of the apartment, the sky was still soft with early light, the air carrying a quiet calm before the city fully woke. Amina held Sami's hand as they walked, her steps steady but her thoughts loud. What if she failed? What if she couldn't keep up? What if this was all temporary? She pushed the thoughts down. There was no space for doubt now. At the daycare, Sami clung to her a little longer than usual, his fingers tightening around her sleeve. "I'll come back," she reassured him, kneeling down. "And you're going to have fun here, okay?" He nodded slowly, still unsure, but trusting her anyway. That trust hit her harder than anything else. "I'm proud of you, Mama," he said suddenly. Her throat tightened. "I'm proud of you too." When she finally walked away, it felt like leaving a piece of herself behind. But it also felt like stepping forward into something new. By 8:55 a.m., she was standing once again in the lobby of the building. The same place that had turned her away just days ago. Only this time, everything felt different. She wasn't holding Sami's hand. She wasn't asking for permission. She was walking in as someone who belonged. The receptionist looked up, recognition flashing briefly across her face, There was a moment of hesitation, then a polite, slightly forced smile. "Good morning." Amina returned it calmly. "Good morning." No explanations. No apologies. She walked past. The elevator doors closed behind her with a soft chime, and as they rose, she caught her reflection in the mirrored walls. She looked the same. Same clothes, same face, but something had shifted. When the doors opened on the 12th floor, she stepped out into a space that now felt less intimidating and more possible. "Hey," a voice called. She turned to see Zara approaching, a tablet in hand, her expression sharp but not unkind. "You're on time," Zara said. "I didn't want to be late," Amina replied. "Good." "I don't like late people," Zara said casually, then gestured toward a desk near the window. "That's yours for now." Amina walked over, her fingers brushing lightly against the edge of the desk, as if confirming it was real. It wasn't big, not compared to the rest of the office, but it was hers. Temporary, maybe, but still hers. "All right," Zara continued. "We're not going to waste time. You'll shadow Malik today. He'll walk you through current campaigns. Then we'll see what you can do." Amina nodded. "Okay." Malik turned out to be a tall man with a relaxed posture and sharp eyes that seemed to miss nothing. "So you're the one," he said, glancing at her. "The one?" she asked. "The one Arman brought in personally," he clarified. "That doesn't happen." She shifted slightly. "It was a unique situation." He smirked faintly. "Yeah, I heard, but there was no hostility in his tone, just curiosity." "Come on," he said, gesturing to his screen. "Let's get started." The hours that followed moved quickly. Faster than she expected. The systems were familiar, even if updated. The concepts came back to her almost instantly: metrics, engagement rates, audience behavior, campaign structures. It felt like muscle memory waking up after a long sleep. "All right," Malik said after a while. "What do you think?" She leaned in slightly, studying the data. "The engagement drop isn't random," she said slowly. "It's consistent across all platforms." "That usually means messaging." He raised an eyebrow. "Go on." They shifted tone. She continued. "Look here, 6 months ago, their content was more personal. Now it's too polished. They lost connection with their audience." Malik nodded slightly. "Not bad." By midday, she was already drafting ideas. Not because she was told to, but because she couldn't stop herself. She needed to prove she belonged here. At lunch, she sat quietly in the break room, holding a cup of tea, her mind still running through possibilities. "You always think this hard?" a voice asked. She looked up. "Arman." Her posture straightened instantly. Sorry. I didn't hear you come in." He gave a small smile. "That's because you were busy." He set his coffee down beside hers. "How's your first day?" he asked. "Fast," she admitted. "But good." He nodded. "Good is a start." There was a brief pause, comfortable but not empty. "Thank you," she said quietly. He looked at her, slightly puzzled. "For what?" "For not letting me walk out that day," she replied. His expression shifted just slightly. "I didn't do anything special," he said. "I just paid attention." She held his gaze for a second, then nodded. "That matters," she said. He studied her for a moment longer, then gave a small nod before picking up his coffee again. "Keep doing what you're doing," he said. "You're here for a reason." And just like that, he walked away. But his words stayed. The afternoon brought more work, more conversations, more moments where she felt the gap between where she had been and where she was now. But instead of shrinking, she leaned into it. By the end of the day, her desk had notes scattered across it, ideas half-written, plans forming. As she packed up, she noticed a small sticky note on the corner of her monitor. "Good start. Let's see what you do next." A small smile touched her lips. When she picked Sami up later, he ran into her arms, his face lighting up instantly. "Mama!" he shouted. She laughed, lifting him slightly. "How was your day?" she asked. He grinned. "I made a friend, and I drew a dinosaur." She smiled. "That sounds like a very important day." As they walked home together, hand in hand, the city around them buzzing with life, Amina felt something unfamiliar settle in her chest. Not relief. Not just hope. Something stronger. Like she wasn't just surviving anymore. Like she was finally building something. Something real. The first few weeks passed in a rhythm Amina had almost forgotten existed. Not the chaotic rhythm of survival where every hour felt uncertain, but something steadier. Something structured. Mornings began earlier, nights ended later, and in between there was work. Real work that demanded her focus, her energy, her attention in a way that left little room for doubt. Still, doubt found its way in sometimes. It crept in quietly during late nights when Sammy was asleep and the apartment fell silent. It whispered in the moments when she reviewed her own work twice, then a third time, questioning whether it was good enough, whether she was good enough. It lingered in the background, reminding her how quickly things could fall apart if she slipped. But every day she showed up. Every day she pushed forward. And slowly, something began to change. People started to notice. It wasn't loud or immediate. There were no grand announcements, no sudden recognition. It started with small things. A nod during a meeting, a brief acknowledgement when her idea was used, a moment where someone paused to ask her opinion instead of speaking over her. It was subtle, but it mattered. One morning about 3 weeks in, Zara called her into a meeting room. Amina walked in with a notebook in hand, her posture straight, her expression focused. Zara stood by the glass board, arms crossed. "We've got a problem," she said without preamble. "Client engagement is dropping faster than expected. We need a recovery plan." Amina nodded slightly, waiting. Zara glanced at her. "You've been looking at the numbers, right?" "Yes," Amina replied. "Good," Zara said. "Then talk." There was no warning, no build-up, just expectation. Amina took a breath, stepping forward slightly. "The issue isn't just the content," she began. "It's consistency." Zara raised an eyebrow. "Explain." "The brand is trying to appeal to too many audiences at once," Amina continued. "They've lost clarity. Their messaging used to be specific, targeted. Now it's scattered." A few others in the room exchanged looks. "And your solution?" Zara asked. Amina said, "Pick one primary audience and rebuild engagement there first. Strengthen that base before expanding again." Zara tapped her finger lightly against her arm. "Keep going." Amina did. She spoke about strategy, about reconnecting with the audience, about rebuilding trust instead of chasing numbers. And as she spoke, something shifted. Not just in the room. In herself. She wasn't just trying anymore. She was contributing. When she finished, the room was quiet for a second. Then Malik leaned back slightly. "She's right," he said. Zara didn't smile, but there was a flicker of approval in her eyes. "All right," she said. "Put it into a proposal. I want something solid by tomorrow." Amina nodded. "You'll have it." As the meeting ended, she felt her pulse still racing, but there was something else beneath it now. Confidence. Real, growing confidence. That afternoon, she worked without pause, her focus sharp, her ideas flowing more naturally than they had in years. She didn't overthink every word. She didn't second-guess every decision. She just worked. And it showed. By the next morning, her proposal was complete. Clear, detailed, strong. Zara reviewed it in silence, flipping through the pages slowly. Amina stood across from her, hands clasped lightly, waiting. Finally, Zara looked up. "This is good," she said. Amina blinked. "Not bad. Not decent. Good. We'll present this to the client," Zara continued. "You'll be in the meeting." Amina's breath caught slightly. "Me?" "Yes, you," Zara replied. "It's your strategy." That single moment carried more weight than anything else so far. Not just being heard, being trusted. The client meeting was set for that afternoon. Amina spent the hours leading up to it preparing, reviewing her points, organizing her thoughts. But when she walked into the conference room, something unexpected happened. Arman was there, sitting at the head of the table, calm as ever, his presence filling the room without effort. He glanced at her briefly as she entered, his expression unreadable but steady. No pressure. No extra attention, just acknowledgement. It grounded her. The meeting began. Zara opened, outlining the issue. Then she turned to Amina. "Walk them through your plan." Amina stepped forward, her heart pounding but her voice steady. She spoke clearly, confidently, explaining the strategy, the reasoning, the expected outcomes. At first, she focused only on the client. But as she continued, she became aware of something else. Armin was watching, not casually, not distracted, he was listening, fully. And that did something to her. It pushed her to be sharper, stronger, better. By the time she finished, the room felt different. The client nodded slowly. "This makes sense," one of them said. "It's clear," another added. Zara leaned back slightly satisfied. Armin didn't speak immediately. He simply looked at Amina for a moment, then gave a small nod. That was enough. More than enough. The meeting ended with agreement. Her plan was approved. As people began to leave, Amina gathered her notes, her hands steady but her mind still catching up. "You did well," a voice said. She looked up. "Armin, thank you," she replied. He studied her for a second. "You're settling in," he said. "I'm trying," she answered. He shook his head slightly. "You're doing more than trying." There was a brief silence. Then he added, "Keep going." And just like that, he walked away. But his words stayed with her. That evening, when she picked up Sammy, he ran to her as always, his energy bright and warm. "Mama, did you win again?" he asked. She laughed softly. "I think I did," she said. He grinned. "I told you." As they walked home, she felt lighter than she had in a long time. Not because everything was perfect, but because she was no longer standing still. She was moving forward. And for the first time, it felt like the world was moving with her instead of against her. But success didn't come without whispers. Amina started to notice them gradually. Small conversations that stopped when she entered a room. Glances exchanged between co-workers. Nothing direct, nothing obvious, but enough. One afternoon, as she passed by a group near the break area, she caught a fragment of a sentence. "She only got in because of him." She kept walking. Her expression didn't change, but the words lingered. That night, the doubt returned stronger than before. Had she earned this? Or had she been given it? The thought unsettled her more than she expected. The next day she worked harder. Not to prove anything to them, but to prove something to herself, and maybe that was what mattered most. Because every idea she contributed, every solution she offered, every success that followed, it all built something stronger than doubt. It built certainty. Not overnight, but piece by piece. And somewhere in the middle of all that, something else was changing too. Something quieter. Something she wasn't fully ready to name. Because every now and then, when her eyes met Armin's across a room, there was a pause. A moment. Unspoken. Not inappropriate. Not forced. Just there. And she didn't know what it meant. Not yet. The weeks turned into something steadier, something that no longer felt fragile every second. Amina stopped counting days and started measuring progress instead. Not just in numbers or results, but in how she carried herself, how she spoke, how she no longer hesitated before sharing an idea. The office no longer felt like foreign ground. It felt like a place she was slowly claiming. Still, the whispers didn't disappear. They changed. At first they had been curious, then doubtful. Now they were quieter, sharper, more deliberate. Not loud enough to confront, but not silent enough to ignore. "She's improving fast." "Of course she is." "You know why?" Amina heard enough to understand, but she refused to react. Instead, she worked, harder than before, not out of fear now, but out of determination. Because deep down, she knew something simple and powerful. If she became undeniable, no one's opinion would matter. And she was getting there. One afternoon, Zara called another team meeting. This time, the tone was different. "We've got a new client," Zara said, pacing slightly. "Big one. High visibility. If this goes right, it puts us ahead for the next quarter." Everyone straightened. Amina felt it too, the shift in energy, the stakes. "What's the angle?" Malik asked. "Rebranding," Zara replied. "They've got reach, but their identity is outdated. They want something bold, something fresh." Zara's eyes moved across the room, then paused on Amina. "You'll be part of this one." Amina blinked slightly. "Me?" "Yes, you," Zara said. "You've got instincts for audience connection. Let's see if they hold up under pressure." Amina nodded. "I'm ready." And she meant it. The next few days became intense. Brainstorming sessions, long discussions, constant revisions. Ideas were thrown around, challenged, rebuilt. It wasn't easy, but it was exactly where she needed to be. Late one evening, As most of the office had emptied out, Amina remained at her desk, reviewing concepts for what felt like the 100th time. "You're still here." She looked up. Armand stood near the doorway, his sleeves rolled slightly, his expression calm but observant. "I didn't realize how late it was," she admitted. He stepped closer, glancing at her screen. "Big project," he said. "Yes," she replied. "I want to get it right." He studied the work for a moment. "You don't have to prove anything," he said. She let out a small breath. "I'm not trying to prove anything to anyone else," she said quietly. "Just to myself." He looked at her then, more carefully. "And what does that look like?" he asked. She hesitated. "Being good enough that no one can question why I'm here," she answered. There was a brief silence. Then he said something that stayed with her. "They'll always find something to question," he said. "That doesn't mean you have to listen." She held his gaze for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Maybe," she said. "But I still want to earn it." A small, almost imperceptible smile touched his expression. "You already are," he replied. The words were simple, but they landed deeper than she expected. He didn't stay long after that. Just a quiet moment, a few words, then he left, but the effect lingered. The following week, the team presented their concepts to the client. The room was filled with tension. This wasn't just another project. It was a statement. Zara led the presentation, moving through the initial slides with confidence. Then she paused. "Amina," she said, "take it from here." Amina stepped forward, her heart steady despite the pressure. She explained the core idea, the reasoning behind the shift, the emotional connection they were trying to build. She didn't rush. She didn't stumble. She owned it. And as she spoke, she noticed something. The room was listening, not politely, not passively, actively, engaged. When she finished, there was a pause. Then the client nodded slowly. "This," one of them said, "is exactly what we needed." Relief didn't hit her immediately. Instead, it was something quieter, satisfaction. After the meeting, as people began to file out, Zara gave her a brief nod. "Well done," she said. It was enough. Malik gave her a small grin as he passed. "Not bad," he added. But it was Armand's reaction that stayed with her. He didn't say anything right away. He just looked at her, then gave a slight nod. The same one from before. But this time it felt different. Stronger, like acknowledgement. That evening, when Amina picked up Sammy, he was waiting by the door, his eyes lighting up the moment he saw her. "Mama," he shouted, running into her arms. She laughed, lifting him slightly. "How was your day?" she asked. "I drew a rocket," he said proudly. "And it goes to space?" She smiled. "That sounds very important." He nodded seriously. "It is." As they walked home, he talked about his day in small, excited bursts, and Amina listened, her heart lighter than it had been in a long time. For the first time, she didn't feel like she was chasing stability. She felt like she was creating it. But life didn't stay smooth for long. One morning, just as she was getting ready to leave, her phone rang. The daycare. Her stomach dropped instantly. "Hello." "There's been a small issue," the voice said. "We're closing early today due to maintenance. You'll need to pick Sammy up by noon." Amina closed her eyes briefly. Not again. The same situation. The same problem. For a moment, panic tried to take over. But this time something was different. She didn't freeze. She thought. She adapted. She picked Sammy up early, her mind already working through options. There was no one to call. No backup. But she had a choice. Cancel her work for the day. Or, she looked down at Sammy, who was holding her hand, trusting her completely. "Do you want to come to Mama's office?" she asked. His eyes lit up. "Really?" She nodded. "Really?" When she walked into the building again, holding his hand, it felt different from the first time. There was no hesitation in her steps, no fear in her posture. She belonged here now. The receptionist glanced up, surprised for a moment, but said nothing. Amina simply smiled politely and walked past. On the 12th floor, she headed straight to Zara. "I'm sorry?" she said. "Daycare issue. I can work remotely if needed." Zara barely looked up from her screen. "It's fine," she said. "Just keep him from drawing on anything expensive." Amina blinked. "That's it?" she asked. Zara shrugged. You get your work done, I don't care. Relief washed over her. Thank you. She set Sammy up at her desk with his crayons and a small snack. For a while, everything was fine, until suddenly it wasn't. She looked up from her screen and realized he was gone. Her heart stopped. Sammy, she called, standing up quickly. No answer. Panic surged instantly. She checked nearby desks, the hallway, the break room. Nothing. Her breathing quickened. Sammy! Then she heard it. Laughter. But familiar. Coming from down the hall. She followed the sound, her steps fast, her heart pounding. It led her to a door she hadn't noticed before. Slightly open, she pushed it gently, and stepped into something unexpected. A rooftop garden, quiet, beautiful, almost unreal compared to the office below. And there, sitting on a bench, was Armin, with Sammy beside him, laughing, like nothing in the world was wrong. Amina stopped in the doorway, her breath catching. For a moment, she just stood there, watching. Something inside her shifted again. Not fear. Not relief. Something softer. Something deeper. Something she wasn't ready to name. Yet, Amina stood there for a moment longer than she realized, her hand still resting lightly against the doorframe, her breathing slowly returning to normal. The panic that had surged through her just seconds ago began to settle, replaced by something quieter, something she couldn't quite define. Sammy looked up first. Mama, he called out happily, jumping off the bench and running toward her. She knelt down instantly, pulling him into a tight embrace. You scared me, she whispered, brushing his hair back, her voice softer than she intended. He mumbled, hugging her back. I was just looking. She closed her eyes for a second, holding him close before pulling back slightly. Don't wander off like that, okay? He nodded quickly. Okay. She stood then, her eyes lifting toward Armin. He was still seated, watching them quietly, one arm resting casually along the back of the bench. There was no tension in his posture, no awkwardness, just calm observation, like he had been part of the moment without intruding on it. I'm sorry, Amina said, stepping forward slightly. I didn't realize he had wandered this far. Armin shook his head lightly. He didn't wander far, he said. Just followed curiosity. Amina let out a small breath. I should have been paying more attention. He's fine, Armin replied. He found a good place. Sammy looked between them, then tugged at Amina's hand. Mr. Fancy showed me the plants, he said proudly. Amina blinked. Mr. Fancy. Armin raised an eyebrow, a hint of amusement in his expression. I'll take that as a compliment, he said. Amina couldn't help but smile faintly. It is, she said. In his language, it definitely is. Sammy nodded enthusiastically. It means you're important. Armin let out a quiet chuckle. I see. There was a brief pause, comfortable in a way that felt unfamiliar to Amina. The city stretched out around them, the sounds distant, softened by the height. The air carried a light breeze, brushing gently against her face, grounding her in the moment. You come up here often? She asked, glancing around. Sometimes, Armin replied. When I need space to think. She nodded slowly. I can see why. Another pause. Then he stood. You should get back, he said. Before someone actually notices he's missing. Amina gave a small nod. Yes, of course. Sammy reached up, tugging lightly at Armin's sleeve. Can I come again? He asked. Amina immediately opened her mouth to respond, but Armin answered first. Only if you don't disappear without telling your mom, he said. Sammy grinned. Okay. Amina shook her head slightly, though there was a softness in her expression. Thank you, she said quietly. Armin met her gaze briefly. You don't have to thank me, he said. Like I said before, you're not doing this alone. The words settled into her more deeply this time. Not alone. She nodded once. Still, she said. I appreciate it. He didn't argue. They walked back inside together, Sammy between them, holding Amina's hand but glancing up at Armin occasionally as if making sure he was still there. Back at her desk, Amina settled Sammy again. This time keeping a closer eye on him as she returned to her work, but something had shifted. Not in a dramatic way. Not in a way she could easily explain. Just quietly. That evening, after they returned home, Sammy sat at the small table, drawing with intense focus. Amina moved around the kitchen, preparing a simple dinner, but her attention kept drifting back to him. "What are you drawing?" she asked finally. He didn't look up. "Use," he said. She smiled slightly. He nodded. "Me, you and Mr. Fancy." Her hand stilled. She turned slowly, walking over to him. "Let me see." He held up the paper. 3 figures. Simple. Uneven lines, but clear. Amina stared at it longer than she expected to. "Why 3? She asked softly. Sammy shrugged. "Because he helps us." The simplicity of it hit harder than anything else. Amina sat down beside him, her fingers lightly touching the edge of the paper. "He's just helping Sammy," she said gently. Sammy nodded as if that explained everything. "Yeah," he said. "That's why he's there." She didn't know what to say to that. So she didn't. The next few weeks passed quickly, filled with work, routine small victories. But something else was changing too. Something outside of work. Amina began to notice how often Armin appeared. Not in an overwhelming way. Not in a way that felt intrusive, but consistently. A brief conversation in the hallway. A question about a project. A quiet check-in during a late evening. It was subtle, but it was there, and slowly, without either of them acknowledging it directly, a connection was forming. Not rushed, not forced, just growing. One evening, as Amina was finishing up a report, Armin stepped into her office. "You're still here," he said. She looked up, a small smile forming. "So are you." He leaned lightly against the doorframe. "Fair point." She turned back to her screen for a moment, finishing her sentence before saving the document. "Don't," she said, exhaling slightly. He stepped inside then, his gaze moving briefly over the room before settling back on her. "You've been working a lot," he said. She shrugged lightly. "I have a lot to keep up with." He studied her for a moment. "You don't have to carry everything on your own," he said. She let out a small breath. "I've been doing that for a long time," she replied. "I know," he said quietly. That made her look up. "How?" she asked. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked over to the window, his hands slipping into his pockets as he looked out at the city below. "Because I've done the same," he said finally. She frowned slightly. "You?" He nodded once. "I didn't have much growing up," he continued. "No safety net. No one making things easier." Amina listened, surprised. "You don't talk about that," she said. He gave a faint smile. "There's not much to say." She leaned back slightly in her chair. "I think there is," she said. He glanced at her, something softer in his expression now. "Maybe," he admitted. There was a pause. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled something out. A small box. He placed it on her desk. Amina looked at it, confused. "What's this?" "For Sammy," he said. She hesitated before opening it. Inside was a set of colored pencils. High quality. The kind she had never been able to afford. Her chest tightened slightly. "You didn't have to do this," she said. "I know," he replied. She looked up at him. "He's been drawing a lot," he added. "Thought he might like it." She closed the box gently. "He will," she said softly. There was a moment of quiet between them. Then she said something she hadn't planned. "You're a good man." He blinked, just as if the words weren't something he heard often. Then he gave a small, almost self-conscious smile. "Don't say that too loudly," he said. "I've got a reputation." She laughed. A real laugh. And for a moment, everything felt easy. When she got home that night and gave Sammy the pencils, his reaction was immediate. His eyes widened. "Are these mine?" he asked. She nodded. "They're for you." He hugged her tightly. "They're the best ever!" She smiled, holding him close. "Draw something amazing," she said. "I will," he replied confidently. Later that night, after Sami had fallen asleep, Amina sat quietly by the window, her thoughts drifting. Life was changing, not in big, overwhelming ways, but in small, steady ones. And for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid of what came next. She was ready for it. Spring arrived quietly, almost shyly, and with it came the first season in years that did not feel like a fight. Amina noticed it in small things before she noticed it in herself. The sunlight in the kitchen lasted longer in the evenings. Sammy laughed more easily. Bills still existed, work was still demanding, and life was still life. But the constant feeling that disaster was waiting right outside the door had finally started to loosen its grip. At work, the change was harder to ignore. Her trial period ended with numbers no one could argue with. Campaigns she touched improved. Clients remembered her name. Team members who had once looked at her like she was temporary now came to her with questions, ideas, and sometimes quiet respect. Zara did not make speeches and did not hand out praise like Candy, but one Friday afternoon she walked over to Amina's desk, dropped a file in front of her, and said, "Congratulations. It's official." Amina looked down at the letter with hands that suddenly did not feel steady. Full-time. Benefits. Salary increase. Permanent placement. Her eyes moved over the words once, then again, as if they might change if she blinked too hard. "You earned it," Zara said before Amina could speak. "Don't get sentimental and make this awkward." But her mouth twitched at the corner, and that tiny almost smile meant more than 100 warm speeches from someone else. "Thank you," Amina said softly. Zara nodded once. "Good. Now celebrate after work. I still need that client revision by 4. Amina laughed through the sting in her eyes. "You'll have it." When she called the daycare later, asking them to keep Sammy an extra 30 minutes, because she wanted to stop for cake on the way home, her voice trembled with happiness she could barely contain. That evening, she and Sammy sat at their tiny table with 2 slices of chocolate cake from the bakery around the corner, and he listened very seriously as she explained that Mama's job was now permanent. "Permanent means forever?" he asked. She smiled. "Not forever, forever. But it means they want me to stay." He grinned so wide it almost broke her heart. "Because you're the best." She reached across the table and wiped frosting from his lip with her thumb. "Maybe because I work very hard." He nodded like that made perfect sense, then said, "And because Mr. Fancy picked you first." The fork paused halfway to her mouth. "Maybe that too," she admitted. A week later, the company announced its annual charity gala. The invitation arrived in a cream envelope on her desk, her name written neatly across the front. For a moment she simply stared at it, afraid to open it. Afraid the whole thing might somehow belong to another Amina Rahman, one with a simpler life and a closet full of dresses she could afford. Inside was a formal invitation and a note, handwritten in precise, familiar strokes. "I hope you'll come. There's no one at my table I'd rather talk to." Her pulse skipped. She read it twice, then slid it back into the envelope and placed her palm over it, as though that might calm the sudden rush moving through her. Kayla from design noticed first. "Why do you look like you've seen a ghost?" Amina tried to hide the card, which of course made 3 more people curious. By lunch Zara had the invitation in hand, and the note already read. "You two are subtle," she said dryly. Amina felt heat flood her face. "It's not. It is something," Zara replied. "Maybe not office gossip something, but definitely silk dress and dangerous eye contact something." Amina laughed despite herself, then sighed. "I don't even know if I should go." Zara stared at her. "You are going. The only question is whether you're going to let me rescue you from whatever practical disaster you were planning to wear." That was how Amina found herself, 2 evenings later, in a boutique owned by Zara's older sister, standing on a low platform while 3 women pinned satin around her waist and argued lovingly over shades of blue. By the time they were done, the mirror reflected someone she knew and did not know all at once. The dress was elegant without trying too hard, soft silver, blue with clean lines and bare shoulders, the kind of dress that didn't scream for attention and got it anyway. Sammy, when she showed him at home, gasped like she had stepped out of one of his cartoons. "You look like the lady from the moon." She laughed. "I'll take that as a compliment." "It is," he said solemnly. "Mr. Fancy will forget how to talk." The night of the gala, she almost backed out twice. Once while fastening her bracelet. Once while locking the apartment door behind her. It wasn't fear of the event itself. It was fear of what the evening might mean. For months, she and Armin had moved through an unspoken territory that felt careful and warm and increasingly impossible to ignore. They shared glances too long to be accidents, conversations that reached deeper than work, silences that were strangely easy, He never pushed. She never asked. But the space between them had changed, and both of them knew it. The ballroom shimmered with gold light and polished glass. People in tailored suits and evening gowns moved through the room with practiced ease, carrying laughter and champagne, as if both came naturally. Amina stood near the entrance for one uncertain second, clutching her small bag. Then heard her name. She turned. Armin was crossing the room toward her, black tuxedo, steady eyes, that same impossible calm he carried like a second skin. Yet when he stopped in front of her, that calm shifted. His gaze moved over her once. Slowly, and for the first time since she had known him, he seemed almost undone. "You came," he said. She smiled. "You invited me." His answering smile was quieter, warmer. "You look—" He stopped, and that alone made her pulse quicken. "Like the lady from the moon," she offered. His brow lifted. "That was Sammy, wasn't it?" She laughed softly. "Yes." Armin extended his arm. "Then Sammy was right about one thing. I did forget how to talk." The evening unfolded in a blur of music, speeches, introductions, and strange moments in which Amina realized people were looking at her not with pity or suspicion, but with respect. She belonged beside him, because she belonged where she had built herself, and that difference changed everything. At dinner he leaned close, during the chairman's endless speech, and murmured dry observations that made her bite back laughter. During dessert he asked about Sammy's latest drawing phase. On the dance floor, when the band shifted into something slow and impossible to refuse, he held out his hand without flourish, without performance, and simply asked, "Will you?" She placed her hand in his. Dancing with him did not feel like entering a fantasy. It felt stranger than that. Safer, realer. One hand rested lightly at her back, the other held hers. He moved with the same quiet certainty he brought to everything else, guiding without controlling, present without crowding her. After a while, she looked up. "Why did you really stop that day?" He met her eyes. "Because I saw a woman being dismissed for a problem that should never have defined her. And because you still stood there with dignity when most people would have broken." "That wasn't dignity," she said. "That was me trying not to cry in public." A faint smile touched his mouth. Even then, the music softened further. Around them, voices blurred into background. "I noticed your mind first," he said quietly. "Then your strength. Then your son. Then the way the room changed every time you walked into it and thought no one saw. By the time I realized I was in trouble, it was already too late." Her breath caught. "Trouble?" she echoed. He nodded once. "The kind I don't want to be rescued from." For a moment she could only look at him. All the careful distance they had kept, all the restrained steps, all the words unsaid because both of them respected the cost of speaking too soon, narrowed into that one quiet truth. When the song ended, neither of them stepped away immediately. Outside the hotel, the city glowed beneath a dark velvet sky. Cars passed, lights moved, the world continued. Yet the air between them felt suspended. Armin turned toward her fully. "I don't want to make your life harder." "You haven't," she said. "I also don't want to be another man who enters your world with promises and leaves you carrying the consequences." His voice was low, steady, and more vulnerable than she had ever heard it. "So I'm saying this carefully. I care about you. Deeply. I care about Sammy. I think about both of you when I wake up and when I fall asleep. And if there is a chance for something honest here, I want it. But only if you do too." Amina had spent so long being strong that tenderness sometimes startled her more than cruelty ever had. She looked at him and saw no performance, no savior, no distant CEO framed by power. She saw a man asking without taking, offering without trying to own. "There is a chance," she said, her voice soft but certain. "There has been for a while." Relief moved across his face so quickly and so genuinely that it made her smile. He stepped closer, slow enough for her to stop him if she wanted. She didn't. His hand lifted, brushing one loose strand of hair behind her ear. Then he kissed her, gentle at first, as if he understood exactly how much could be changed by a single moment. She answered with the same care, and the city around them disappeared. Their beginning was not dramatic after that. It was deliberate, beautiful in ordinary ways. Breakfasts on Sundays with Sami talking non-stop between bites. Evenings on the rooftop garden where Arman pretended not to enjoy the child-sized tea parties and then accepted every plastic cup he was offered. Honest conversations, boundaries, adjustments later. Fear too, because love after hardship always arrives carrying old shadows. Months later, when Amina and Sami moved into Arman's house, it did not feel like rescue. It felt like expansion. Like a life they had all been building in separate pieces had finally found its proper shape. Sami claimed his new room with instant authority, arranging books, pencils, toy cars, and 3 framed drawings on the shelves. One of them was the old stick figure picture from the apartment table. 3 figures holding hands. One night, after bedtime stories and a long discussion about whether astronauts ever get lonely, Sami wrapped his arms around Amina's neck and whispered, "Are we okay now?" She held him close, feeling the weight of every year behind that small question. "Yes," she whispered back. "We are more than okay." Later, in the quiet of the hallway, Arman waited for her outside Sami's room. She leaned into him without thinking, and he folded her into his arms like that space had always belonged to her. For so long, Amina had believed survival was the highest thing she could hope for. Keep going, keep working, keep carrying, keep stitching together a life from effort and exhaustion. But standing there, held by a man who had seen her clearly and loved her, without trying to erase the woman she had become, she finally understood something better. She had never needed saving. She had needed to be seen. And once she was, everything changed.